bio about Dr. Emma Camp. She's a marine biologist, a team leader of the Future Reefs team at the UTS, a National Geographic Explorer, and a RELAX Associate Laureate, Australian Women's Science Fellow, and was recently named the winner of Macquarie University Eureka Prize for the Outstanding Early Career Researcher. And we have who is Dr. Emma Camp, and she is going to be presenting today. I hope you're looking forward to her presentation. Her title is Stakeholder Site Stewardship to Conserve Coral Reefs. I'd like to share her screen. Welcome.
Hi. Is the slides now showing?
Yes, the screen is showing.
Great.
Please confirm if you can see it on your end. Oh, sorry. Yes, it is showing. Sorry.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for having me today on World Environment Day. It's a pleasure to talk about coral reefs in particular. It's World Ocean Day on the 8th, so coming up very soon. I'm head of a research team here in the University of Technology Sydney, and we're really focused on how local site stewardship is crucial to conserve our coral reefs. Before I go much further, I do want to acknowledge and pay my deepest respects to the traditional custodians of the land and sea countries where I'm privileged to work, from Sydney through to the Cairns and Port Douglas region. And I recognise their continued connection to land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And just to say that I'm lucky enough to work with a whole range of stakeholders that some of the work I'm going to show you involves. So why coral reefs? Well, when we think about the environment, when we think about the change that we're experiencing, coral reefs are kind of like the canary in the coal mine. They're an early warning signal for us to see that something's going on in the world. And they really show us through history, through their skeletal records, we can actually see how the environment has changed. And it really amplifies the rate of change that we're experiencing now with climate change. So before I kind of talk a bit about the sustainability that we look to do through community restoration, it's good to understand what a reef is. So a coral reef is this amazing diverse system. If you think about the Great Barrier Reef, it's visible from space. It's the size of Italy, the country, but actually it's made up of individual colonies that are closely related to jellyfish. And if we zoom in on these individual polyps, we see that there's actually this microscopic algae that live inside the coral and give the coral its energy. So you can think of the coral as a factory and the algae as the solar panels giving the factory its energy. And then there are bacteria and viruses that are like the workers within the factory, moving resources around. And these systems are really, really complex, but provide essential services around the world. So they provide resource provision, cultural value, regulatory services, support services. But coral reefs are under threat globally, primarily from physical damage, changes in water quality, and climate change. Climate change in particular, ocean warming, ocean acidification, ocean deoxygenation, these trio of stresses are leading us to a situation where reefs, at least as we know them, may cease to exist. The latest UN report has suggested that if we hit 1.5 degrees of warming, 70 to 90% of the world's coral reefs will be lost. Here in Australia, where I am, we've had several coral bleaching events. This is where the algae leaves the coral due to stress and the coral can't stay alive for very long. We've had the stress event in 2016, 2017, 2020, again in 2022. And what this means is that we're seeing just a massive loss of coral cover. So what can we do? We want to try and stop that decline or ideally reverse the trend. And so we've worked with local stakeholders to establish something called Coral Nurture Programme. It's recognised as one of the United Nations ecosystem of restoration actors. And we basically partner research and local stakeholders to try to optimise how we restore coral reefs. To date, we've outplanted over 85,000 corals on the Great Barrier Reef, and that's through using local stakeholder knowledge and resources and combining that with scientific research. We've basically transformed the scale at which we can outplant by developing new ways, new tools to outplant corals, diversifying how we access corals to outplant them, so using naturally fragmented corals, but also growing them in coral nurseries. And then we've looked to see how can we transform this into practices that are operated on the reef. So for us, we work with tour operators and traditional owners who have boats who go out to the reef to bring down the cost of restoration. And finally, and really importantly, is the question is how can we scale activities? And that's by cooperating and working as a network. And we've seen that site stewardship in this manner, empowering the local communities to look after their reefs and providing new means to do that is helping to provide not only ecological resilience, but also socioeconomic and ecological resilience in the face of climate change. We look at a variety of research questions to try and facilitate the practices. And these include things like optimizing how we grow corals. So the top pictures show corals 1 year ago and the bottom corals a year later. So you can see particularly for the plating corals on the left-hand side, how quickly they grow. And there's just some more examples of them when the coral gets put out on the reef. We find that actually the corals, when they're in the nurseries, create novel fish, like habitat for fish communities. So again, this is a way that we can try and support the reef and support the life that relies on the reef while they're going through this environmental change. And importantly, we use novel science to try and find out which corals have got the best chance of surviving in the future, so we can propagate those so they have the best chance of surviving future environmental change. So as I mentioned, the community collectively through Coral Nurture Programme has outplanted over 85,000 corals of diverse types, nearly 1,500 hours of diving time within the community. So before I take some questions, I think I just wanted to end on this quote. A lot of people say to me they often feel helpless or they feel that they can't do anything. And we felt like that before we set up Coral Nurture Programme. And it's really been transformative to work with the local communities to try and build resilience on the reef. And so this quote by Sylvia Earle asks, many of us ask, what can I as one person do? But everything in history, good or bad, starts because somebody does or doesn't do something. So I think it's a great reminder that our everyday actions and what we choose to do or not do can collectively make a difference. So thank you. Happy World Environment Day, and I'd love to take some questions.
Thank you so much. That was a very nice presentation. I just have a few questions for you as a way also for the audience to just ask. So what are some of the effective adaptation strategies that can be adopted to address the challenges of ocean acidification, as you've mentioned in your presentation, and coral bleaching? So maybe you could answer that very quickly, maybe in a minute.
Yes. Thank you. So the biggest threat that's causing that is climate change. So anything that we can do to reduce the impacts of climate change, driving our car less as an example, can help, but that alone is not going to be enough. And so as scientists, we now are looking for a toolbox basically of approaches that we can apply. So this is looking at things like we can actually manipulate the types of algae or the types of bacteria within the coral to try and select the ones that have got greater chance to survive through warming or acidification. We're trying to map ocean currents and map locations to find the natural refugia that have got the best chance of surviving. So there's a whole variety of things, from kind of using nature for nature's sake through to things like genetic engineering to try to enhance that resilience. So it's really going to be all tools in our toolbox to try and buy time for coral reefs.
Thank you so much. I'll just go straight to the second one. So how can marine protected areas and ocean zoning help address the biodiversity crisis and, as you've mentioned, climate change?
Yeah, great question. We know through decades of kind of research now that any kind of conservation areas, marine protected areas, are really important to minimise stresses on that part of the reef. So even though the big threats are climate change, we know that local stresses such as unsustainable fishing practices or poor tourism can make that worse. So any way that we can minimize the stresses that we can control, we know that that can increase fish stocks, it can increase biodiversity, and obviously we're in a biodiversity crisis at the moment. So anything that can help sustain that is great. The big challenge is to enforce them, so they don't end up just being a paper park where we know they exist, but without the necessary enforcement, it's really hard to actually see those benefits.
Thank you so much. And lastly, I just ask, how can we incorporate SDGs in marine conservation? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, great. Great. For me, obviously, goal 14, life below water, is the obvious one. But I actually think for me, it's goal 17, and it's about partnerships. And it's, the challenges that we face, not only in the ocean, but, in the environment as a whole, are not going to be solved by one individual, one scientist, one organization. It really takes that collective action, that collective knowledge for us all to come together. So for me, utilizing partnerships for the goals, thinking outside of the box, looking for new ways to do things is how we're going to solve the problems that we're facing.
Thank you so much. There's a last question from Bridget. What innovative approaches or technologies have you come across that can help cities mitigate water scarcity, improve water quality, and ensure long-term water sustainability?
Okay. So a little bit out of my direct research area, but I am aware of a few kind of activities, particularly around plastic pollution. We've seen a few examples of those here in Sydney, where people are using innovative nets and barriers that are being created around drainage. And that's been to try and stop any plastic or any things that shouldn't end up in the water being collected at that waterway, not ending up then into people's drinking waters or eventually into the ocean. So again, not my direct area of focus, but that's something I know can help.
Come back. Hello, I'm back. Sorry for that. Sorry for that, but I'm
No
back.
problem.
Yes. Thank you for responding to the question.
No problem.
Seems like there's no other question in the comment. Yeah, so thank you so much.
No
We
problem.
appreciate
Thank
the
you for having me.
presentation.